Hello and welcome to Rapid Learning Session on Sexual Orientation, Gender Identity, Expression, and Sex Characteristics, or Sogie Sc. My name is Anusha Karnanidhi, and I'm from Nation AIDS Council, Malaysia. In this session, we'll be looking at this concept to deepen our understanding and awareness of diversity in human sexuality and gender. Here are the subjects we'll be covering. First, we will look at sexual orientation, then move on to gender identity and expression. Thirdly, sex characteristics, then about trans people and HIV, and finally, we'll look at specific Sogie Sc terminology. So let's begin with sexual orientation. This refers to who we are attracted to. This includes lesbian, gay, bisexual, and heterosexual orientations. Sexual orientation is not about our gender identity, but rather it describes our romantic and sexual attraction to others, whether to the same sex, opposite sex, or both. Lesbian refers to women who are attracted to other women, which gay typically refers to men who are attracted to men, though some women attracted to women also use the same term. Their sexual orientation is known as homosexual. On the other hand, homosexual orientation describes those trans women, trans men, women, and men who are attracted to someone opposite to their identified gender. Bisexual orientation describes a person who is attracted to both men and women. People who identify outside of the man-woman binary, in other words, non-binary people, have sexual orientation that reflects who they are attracted to, and it can be homosexual, heterosexual, or bisexual. Like anyone else, in fact, understanding sexual orientation is key to creating inclusive environments where people can express their identities freely without judgment. Next, let's talk about gender identity and expression. Gender identity is how we feel inside, whether we identify as male, female, both, or neither. This internal sense of identity may or may not align with the sex assigned at the birth. For an example, a person assigned female at birth may internally identify as a man, which makes them transgender men. Gender expression, on the other hand, is how we present ourselves externally, such as through clothing, hairstyle, and behavior. It doesn't always align with our gender identity. A person could express themselves as a masculine, feminine, or androgynous, regardless of how they identify internally. As we've seen, gender identity and expression are deeply personal, and they may be influenced by societal norms but don't necessarily follow them. Here you can see how some people identify themselves, okay, by gender. They may not align with their sex assigned at the birth. We also need to call people using the right pronoun. For someone identified as a woman, even though their sex assigned at the birth was male, they were known as a trans woman or transgender woman. The correct pronoun for this person will be she and her. For someone who identified themselves as a man, even though their sex assigned at the birth was female, they are known as trans men or transgender men. As such, we address them with he, him, and his. And for someone who identifies themselves as both or neither gender, regardless of any sex assigned at the birth, they are known as non-binary person, and we use the pronoun they or this is how we express ourselves regardless our gender identity, sex at the birth. It can be masculine, feminine, or can be both, which is androgynous. Now moving on to sex characteristics. These refer to biological aspect of a person, including chromosomes, reproductive organs, and secondary features like muscle mass or breast development. Primary sex characteristics are present at birth, while secondary ones develop during puberty. It is important to recognize that everyone has sex characteristics, but they don't necessarily determine a person's gender identity. This distinction is particularly important for understanding intersex individuals whose biological characteristics may not fit typical definition of male or female. Now I'll summarize what we have learned so far. I'll take myself as an example. Although I was assigned male at the birth, I identify myself as a woman. Therefore, I'm known as a trans woman. I prefer to be addressed using she and her. I express myself in more feminine way. For instance, I grow and color my long hair, wear woman clothes, paint my nails, and wear jewelry. My romantic feelings are only towards men, so I consider myself to be heterosexual in terms of orientation. Everyone has a sexual orientation, a gender identity, a gender expression, and sex characteristics. This Sogie Sc topic is important not only to trans or LGBT people, but to all human beings all over the world. Now, as I share about myself, think about your own Sogie Sc and maybe tell a friend about it. Now let's talk about transgender individuals and the specific challenges they face, particularly related to HIV. You can meet transgender people anywhere in the world. Even though there's a limited data on the population size of transgender people, a United Nations Development Program study in 2015 estimated that there were around 9 million trans people in the Asian Pacific region alone. Trans people are much more vulnerable compared to other key population due to their visibility. As a result, they face family and society rejection, bullying and violence at home, school, or anywhere. They are also vulnerable to health disparities in terms of accessing to safe hormones, gender-affirming services, HIV, SCI, mental health, and substance use. Understanding these challenges is crucial for creating effective HIV prevention and treatment program for transgender communities. Globally, transgender people are 20 times more likely to be HIV positive than other adults. This is largely due to factors like stigma, family rejection, a lack of access to healthcare services, and limited research data coverage on trans people. In the Asian Pacific region, transgender women account for about 7% of new infection, HIV infection, which is disproportionately high. This statistic reflects the various social and economic vulnerabilities they face, including unequal employment opportunities, healthcare barriers, and widespread discrimination. In terms of antiretroviral therapy or ARV disparities, transgender women with HIV are less likely than cisgender men to access, adhere to, or benefit from the ARV treatment. This gap underscores the need for more inclusive healthcare practices that address the specific barriers transgender face. Many transgender people avoid healthcare due to stigma, past negative experience like being misgendered or harassed, and invasive questions about their identity. Having to educate providers on transgender issues also discourage them from seeking care, delaying critical HIV treatment. For many transgender individuals, gender-affirming therapies such as hormone treatments is a higher priority than HIV care. This can lead to delays or disruption in HIV treatment as their primary focus is on affirming their identity and well-being. Trans people frequently express fear about interaction between antiretroviral drugs and gender-affirming hormone therapy, which may cause transgender individuals to hesitate in starting or continuing HIV treatment. Clear, informed information from healthcare providers is crucial to addressing these concerns. Let's go over some important terms to clarify the language we use when discussing Sogie Sc. Transgender describes someone whose gender identity differs from the sex they were assigned at the birth. Non-binary is a term for people who don't identify exclusively as a male or female. Gender diverse is a term used to describe people who do not conform to their society or cultural expectation for males and females. Trans man is a term used to describe someone who identifies as a man or a boy who was assigned female at birth. Trans woman is a term used to describe someone who identifies as a woman or a girl and who was assigned male at the birth. Trans masculine person is a term used to describe someone who was assigned female at the birth and identifies to some extent as a man or a boy. Trans feminine person is a term used to describe someone who was assigned male at the birth and identified to some extent as a woman or a girl. Cisgender person refers to someone whose gender identity matches the sex they were assigned at. Gender identity is an internal sense of their gender, how they identify and see themselves. Gender identity do not have to be in line with the person's sex assigned at the birth. Gender expression is a person's outward presentation of gender, including style, clothing, and body language. Sexual orientation is a person's feeling or attraction towards other people. It could be emotionally, physically, and sexually. Gender dysphoria is a distress some people feel when their gender identity does not align with the physical body. By understanding and using this term correctly, we can help create a more inclusive environment for people of all gender identities and expressions. To wrap up, Sogie Sc is not just about understanding different identities, but also about fostering empathy and inclusiveness in our communities. Each of us has sexual orientation, a gender identity, a way of expressing ourselves and sex characteristics. By respecting these individual differences, we contribute to a society that values diversity and fights discrimination. Thank you for your kind attention. If you have any question or want to learn more, feel free to reach out.